Ansu Fati, Pedri, Alejandro Balde, Gavi, and now Lamine Yamal. The last 4 years have seen Barcelona's first team graced with prodigious talents who have displayed football abilities that were, and in some cases still are, beyond the capabilities of other footballers their age. The world of football has long been captivated by the promise of prodigious young talents. This couldn't be any truer than at FC Barcelona, where fans eagerly anticipate the emergence of fresh faces who can electrify the world, clad in garnet and blue with their exuberance and raw talent, and for the past 4 years, this is exactly what Barcelona's famed academy La Masia has delivered to culés. I haven't even yet mentioned youngsters like Fermin Lopez, Alex Garrido, Pau Prim, or Pau Cubarsí, all of whom seem to be on the verge of following the footsteps of their recent predecessors and making their mark on both the Barca first team and the Spanish national team as well. However, as the excitement around these young players grows, so does the risk of overplaying them and overburdening them with not just expectations of greatness, but also those of near perfect consistency and both physical and mental invulnerability. In recent history, one can point to both Ansu Fati and Pedri for examples of how the weight of expectation can hinder and even regress a young player's development, and if we were to go further back in the annals of time, or like everybody calls it, history, then Bojan Krkić serves as another more poignant example of how overusing young players can lead to detrimental consequences such as injuries, mental fatigue, fragility, burnout, and stunted development. So seeing all of that and all of what's happening with Barca's first team and all these young players who are in and around it, I can't help but wondering if this is once again about to happen with Gavi and with Lamine Yamal. So here's why I think that Barcelona and Spain need to protect Gavi and Lamine Yamal. So let's take a bit of a closer look at the 3 players who I gave as examples to see exactly what I mean, and we'll start, of course, with Bojan Krkić. Once hailed as the next Messi and Messi's actual cousin, yeah, funny enough, Bojan Krkić's career took a sharp turn for the worse after an impressive start at FC Barcelona. His introduction to top-tier football at such a young age was both promising and expected considering the way in which he had dominated youth football. It was therefore not much of a surprise to see Bojan take to first-team football like a fish to water upon being introduced to the first team. Despite his bright start to life under the bright lights of Camp Nou, though, the relentless schedule eventually took a toll, as in 2008 he had to withdraw himself from Spain's Euros team simply because he was tired. You see, he had just come off a long season in which Barca had a semi-finals run in the Champions League and in which he had been a crucial player for Barca owing to injuries suffered by both Samuel Eto'o and Lionel Messi. All that, coupled with Bojan's under-17 World Cup exploits in the summer of 2007, meant that in a little under 2 years since making his Barcelona debut, Bojan had played no fewer than 70 career games with no breaks in between. So it's really no surprise that his development stalled as he struggled with injuries and just couldn't quite hit the heights he had shown in his first 2 seasons as a professional playing for Barcelona. This eventually led to him embarking on a nomadic career path, moving from club to club in search of stability until his eventual retirement at just 32 years of age. Bojan's story was probably the biggest warning to both Barca and the Spanish national team on the importance of nurturing young talents responsibly. Rushing their progression and overplaying them can lead to not only physical but also mental fatigue, making it challenging for them to fulfill their early potential. But of course, if Barca and Spain had learned their lesson, then I wouldn't be here making this video, and it showed just how much they hadn't learned their lesson by the time that a certain Ansu Fati came onto the scene as a fresh-faced 16-year-old. Ansu Fati's meteoric rise at FC Barcelona was nothing short of astonishing. Bursting onto the scene as a teenager, he quickly became the youngest goal scorer in the history of FC Barcelona, La Liga, the UEFA Champions League, and the Spanish men's national team. Now, admittedly, Ansu Fati's introduction to senior team football wasn't marked by relentless playing time as had been the case for Boyan. To their credit, both Ernesto Valverde and Quique Setién tried their best to use Ansu as sparingly as they could. But the fact that he was regularly churning out moments of magic and game-changing moments during his cameos meant that it was only a matter of time before he became a full-time starter. And with that, he quickly became one whom an entire fan base looked to for game-changing moments of magic in a team filled with stars heading into their twilight years like Messi, Suarez, Rakitic, as well as expensive flops like Griezmann, Coutinho, and Dembele. It was this weight of expectation and obvious capacity for moments of magic that led to Ronald Koeman trying to squeeze out as many minutes as possible from Ansu Fati whenever he started. And eventually, just 9 games into Ronald Koeman's first season at Barca, Ansu Fati suffered that terrible meniscus injury. During his time spent on the sidelines, however, Barca's over-reliance on Ansu to be the player that could help Messi in the final third would only keep growing, and that eventually led to him having to undergo multiple surgeries as well as suffering several hamstring injuries, owing to Barcelona always trying to rush him back, always trying to get him to return earlier than he was supposed to, and not giving him ample time to properly recover. When you then further take into consideration the situation of Pedri, who came shortly after Ansu, well, it becomes very worrisome and alarming what's going on at FC Barcelona. Much like Fati and Boyan, Pedri found himself thrust into Barca's first team out of necessity rather than design. Unlike his other 2 compatriots, Pedri was not from La Masia and did not come into the first team with heaps of expectation and responsibility on his shoulders. However, it didn't take long for that to eventually become the case, as during his debut season with Barca, Pedri played no fewer than 75 games. 20 of those games were for Spain and 55 for Barcelona. For perspective, Barca and Spain's midfield options in that time that Pedri was playing were mind-blowingly good, or at least not to be shrugged at. Thiago Alcantara, Sergio Busquets, Koke, Rodri, Pjanic and Coutinho. For Spain, Thiago and Rodri found themselves on the bench for most of the Euro 2020 tournament as Luis Enrique, much like Ronald Koeman, opted to deploy a teenage Pedri in the starting 11 and keeping him on the pitch for just about every single minute of the tournament. A trick that then under-23 manager Luis de la Fuente gladly repeated with his Spain team as he went all the way to the final of the 2020 Olympics in Tokyo. Sure, like Ansu and Boyan before him, Pedri's emergence as a standout talent for both Barca and the Spanish national team is a testament to his exceptional abilities, which is very much a good thing. However, it is also yet another crucial reminder of the need to exercise caution in the usage of young, prodigious talents, ensuring that history does not repeat itself. The temptation to field talented youngsters continuously in crucial matches must be balanced with the understanding that overexertion can lead to burnout and injuries. Football is, after all, a man's game. Okay, you know what I meant. I didn't mean it like women can't play football because obviously they can. Just look at Aitana, right? What I meant is that professional football is primarily played by adults. So special care should be taken when thrusting young boys into an adult workspace. And no, I don't mean that kind of adult workspace, okay? Like, look, get your mind out of the gutter. You know what? Let me just get back to spitting these facts, okay? Because the point I have been trying to get at obviously has to do with the fact that as a Barcelona fan, when I look at guys like Gavi and like Lamine Yamal, I can't help but get this eerily deja vu kind of vibe from seeing how Barca and Spain are handling them. Both Ansu and Pedri are currently suffering the consequences of overuse and over-reliance, and I can't help but shake the feeling that someone like Gavi could also be in danger. I mean, recently against Osasuna, Gavi played in his 100th game for Barca. Okay, that's nearly 8,000 minutes of top-tier football, despite only just turning 19 last month. And look, it's Gavi we're talking about, okay? Gavi be out there doing Gavi things on the pitch. All right, this isn't somebody who plays with like 5% commitment. And I mean, look, it doesn't happen often that you hear a young player at like 19 playing so many minutes. And it should be a worrying thing that it's happening in a team like Barcelona, a team that should have more than enough quality to distribute minutes more evenly and to prevent young players like Gavi from being overused. Then, of course, there is the young gem that is Lamine Yamal. At just 16 years old, Lamine has already stood out in his first two La Liga starts, the best performance of which probably came against Villarreal. And obviously, because it's FC Barcelona now, everybody thinks Lamine Yamal should start every game and Rafinha should just be, cast into the fires of, what was that mountain where Frodo threw that ring and Smeagol, like that mountain. That's what everybody thinks should happen now with Rafinha because, our precious now is Lamine Yamal. And while he is still not yet taken the record of his predecessor Ansu Fati in being the youngest goal scorer in La Liga and in Barcelona's history, he has already claimed that record for La Roja as he scored on his national team debut against Georgia. And looking at how much Spain used him in this international break, one suspects it won't be too long until he claims that record in La Liga, as he's already shown to have a keen eye for goal and a fabulous finish cutting in on his left foot. One also suspects that it won't take too long either before Xavi Hernandez and Luis de la Fuente are relying on this young Mercurial talent to be the spark of genius that their teams crave so desperately. But neither his club nor national team should be overburdening him at this age, just as they should not overburden Gavi as they have done in the past to Pedri and Ansu. Instead, the examples of Ansu Fati, Bojan Krkic and Pedri should serve as a cautionary tale that offers valuable lessons to Barcelona and to the Spanish national team, as well as, us fans of the game alike. While young talents should be given opportunities, they must be managed judiciously, finding the right balance between nurturing their abilities and protecting their physical and mental well-being, which is hugely essential to a player's development. Coaches like Xavi and like Luis de la Fuentes need to prioritize player rotation and give adequate rest to their young talents, because overusing them and relying heavily on them can lead to injuries and diminished performances. The pressure on young talents can be immense, especially at a club like FC Barcelona, especially with a national team like Spain. So teams need to provide some kind of mental health support and guidance to help these young players cope with some of the expectations and the stress that they have to deal with. I mean, just look at Ferran Torres, for example. We know he was dealing with a lot of stress, a lot of pressure, but, he went and he got help, and just look how much he has benefited from that right now. Furthermore, Barca should adopt a long-term view of a young player's career rather than focusing solely on short-term benefits. This approach will ensure that young talents have the opportunity to reach their full potential. A good example of how all of this can be done is probably Phil Foden at Manchester City. From the jump, Pep Guardiola could have thrust Phil Foden into the thick of the first team. I mean, Lord knows the kid had the ability for it. He was that good. But Pep Guardiola took his time. He didn't rely heavily on Phil Foden, even though he could have. And he was patient and he looked after Foden and now he is easily becoming one of the best midfielders in the world. Like I said before, the world of football has long been captivated by the promise of prodigious young talents, and that fact couldn't be any truer than at FC Barcelona. This captivation, however, can easily lead to young players falling captive to overuse and being overburdened with expectations. We've seen this in the past, like I have just given you examples, with players like Bojan Krkic, with Ansu Fati, and with Pedri. My worry now is that we could be about to witness the same thing play out with both Gavi and Lamine Yamal. Unless Barca can find a way to do something about it, that is. But who is to say that this isn't just going to be another deja vu moment? In reality, the prevailing school of thought, not only in Barcelona, but just widespread throughout the game, is that, if they're good enough, then they're old enough, and, they're going to be played. And while I don't necessarily disagree with that notion, my only hope is that these kids like Lamine Yamal and like Gavi will be played by FC Barcelona in a manner that's going to help them to develop into better footballers than they are currently, and to help them have long careers that will not be cut short by injuries or by being weighed down by the weight of expectation or anything else that we have seen in the past. So here's to hoping that everything goes well, and whatever the case anyway, I'm going to be enjoying watching these two prodigious talents, and here's to hoping for the best for Lamine Yamal and Gavi. This has been Blog Runner Everything, and if this has been your first time tuning in here, well, I hope you liked everything that you saw, and if you do feel so inclined, do hit that like button and also that subscribe button as well. But other than that, do have a good day, and Forza Barca.